In the winter of the year 40, under the rule of Gaius Caesar, known to history as Caligula, Rome moved under a shadow of fear. Ancient writers agree on one thing. The emperor wielded his authority like a weapon, not just to command, but to humiliate. He forced the nobility into rituals and protocols designed to crush their dignity in public view. One story passed down through tradition speaks of Marcus Claudius, an elderly senator compelled to stand as a witness while his own descendants were degraded inside the imperial palace. And this wasn't an isolated incident. It was a carefully engineered system, built to break the pride of Rome's elite. The empire recorded the victims the same way it cataloged taxes or census numbers. Names, ages, and entries were marked in administrative logs, reducing human suffering to mere paperwork. Violence became a bureaucratic routine. Caligula's intention wasn't simply cruelty for cruelty's sake. He wanted the victims and their families complicit, unable to deny their participation. Fear became a political weapon. Shame turned into a brand stamped on the Senate itself. To understand how Rome reached this abyss, we have to return to one bright spring morning in the year 37, when a 25-year-old was hailed as the empire's greatest hope, Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, affectionately called Caligula for the tiny soldier's boots he wore as a child, was the adored son of the beloved general Germanicus. His rise to power was greeted not with worry, but with celebration that lasted 100 days. The people saw in him the heir of a glorious dynasty. Senators sighed with relief after the paranoid reign of Tiberius. No one could have imagined that this charismatic, well-educated, seemingly gentle young man would become the architect of one of Rome's most systematized nightmares. His childhood had been a strange mix of privilege and terror. He grew up among soldiers who worshipped his father, learning discipline and strategy, but he also witnessed the deadly games of palace politics. Germanicus, many believed, had been poisoned. His mother, Agrippina the Elder, was exiled. His older brothers were executed or imprisoned. Young Caligula survived by pretending. In the court of Tiberius, he learned that acting harmless, playing the fool even, was sometimes the only path to stay alive. Those years behind a mask taught him something fundamental. In Rome, survival depended on performance, and he became a master of the craft. The first months of his reign were nothing short of miraculous. He reduced taxes, freed political prisoners, hosted dazzling public games, repaired roads, began aqueducts, and distributed bonuses to the legions Rome loved him. Women tossed flowers in his path. Children sang songs about the new emperor. Senators, who would later light torches for darker purposes, competed for his favor. After the gloomy twilight of Tiberius, Caligula's rule felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Where Tiberius had secluded himself on Capri, Caligula walked openly through the streets. He sat among spectators at the games. He dined with senators. He was accessible, magnetic, generous. Rome whispered that perhaps the gods had finally blessed them with the perfect ruler. But everything changed after a strange, violent illness in the autumn of 37. Court physicians recorded fevers so intense they seemed impossible, convulsions that required 6 men to restrain him, and hallucinations where he screamed that he spoke with Jupiter himself. For days, the entire empire held its breath. Massive sacrifices were offered in every temple. Some citizens vowed their own lives in exchange for the emperor's recovery. When he woke, something in him had shifted, something deep. The first sign was almost subtle. He ordered that every statue of the gods in Rome be refashioned with his own face. Then came the unmistakable transformation. People said the body never lies, and Caligula's revealed a terrifying truth. His warm, expressive eyes turned cold and fixed, the pupils unnaturally wide. He developed chronic insomnia, wandering the palace halls at night, murmuring to statues, to the moon, to enemies no one else could see. Servants found him at dawn in the gardens, naked and smeared with dirt, claiming he had been planting the future of Rome. But what he planted were the foundations of something much darker. The descent began within his own family. His sisters, Drusilla, Julia Livilla, and Agrippina the Younger, were not simply relatives, but the first victims of what would evolve into a state-sanctioned system. His obsession with Drusilla was especially intense. He called her his Diana. He seated her in the empress's place at official banquets. He treated her in public as though she were his wife. When she died in 38, he spiraled into a grief that was more possession than love. He banned laughter, bathing, and family dinners during the mourning period. Anyone who showed even a hint of joy was executed. With Drusilla gone, his attention shifted mercilessly to his other sisters, and then outward to the wives and daughters of the Senate. He forced them into acts they could not refuse, while he watched from a golden throne built specifically for these occasions. He took notes: who seemed eager, who hesitated, who tried to be gentle. Those notes would later become tools of ruthless political blackmail. A senator too enthusiastic with Julia Livilla suddenly found himself voting in full support of imperial proposals. Another who faltered discovered his young son missing, only to have him returned days later, mutilated. The emperor's message was clear. In the new Rome he forged, everyone was either a victim or a collaborator. Neutrality did not exist. Imperial physician Lucius Scriba left behind records, discovered centuries later in a villa near Pompeii, that described with chilling precision how Caligula forced him to examine the patrician women, evaluating their fertility and endurance. These examinations were conducted in the emperor's presence, accompanied by explicit questions and degrading commentary. This wasn't random cruelty. It was a system, organized, documented, and administered with bureaucratic efficiency. Every victim was assigned a number. Every act was recorded. Fees were established: 16 sesterces for a night with a senator's wife, 2,000 for his virgin daughter, 5,000 for both together. The money was registered as voluntary donations for the welfare of the state. The palace itself was redesigned into what Caligula called the Temple of Divine Service Rooms, were designated for specific purposes: the Hall of Jupiter for ritual violations, the Chamber of Venus for forced reenactments of myths, the Room of Priapus for sexual torture, adorned with explicit frescoes commissioned by the emperor. The marble corridors that once echoed with debates about the fate of the known world now carried very different sounds. Sounds the Senate heard, knew, and pretended not to hear. What Caligula created was a machine with layers so complex they seemed impossible. First came the senators' wives, forced into the imperial cult. They were given assigned schedules, ritual garments, and silk togas, so sheer they revealed everything. Then came the daughters, introduced at 12 to what he called divine education. But Caligula pushed further. Secret documents revealed he implemented a selective breeding program. The most fertile women were forced to conceive children who would be raised as perfect imperial slaves, children with no family, no identity, trained from birth to serve the emperor's desires, and the men were not spared. Caligula expanded his system until it consumed every corner of Roman society. Young sons of patrician families were subjected to a different kind of cruelty. He ordered them feminized, dressed in saffron-dyed, transparent tunics. Their faces painted with white lead and bright vermilion, they were taught to walk, gesture, and move like women. During imperial banquets, they were paraded before guests and auctioned off for a night. Caligula himself would sometimes take part, not out of desire, but to prove a point. Every violation was a message carved into Rome's soul. Nothing is sacred, no tradition untouchable, no family protected. But the darkest element of Caligula's system wasn't just the violence. It was the forced complicity. Fathers weren't merely aware of what was happening to their wives and daughters.